I'm hearing and I'm seeing on social media is that people are saying that they're broke, but airports are packed, right? So people are going on vacations and people are going on getaways and, things like that. I have an idea of why people do that, right? Especially around the summertime. I go to places you go, a lot of us go. But curious to hear your thoughts on like, we're people are saying that they are broke, right? Like because of inflation and so many other reasons. But then like airports are packed. So is it like because of, kind of stress relief kind of situation, or it's just like, hey, no matter what happens, this is something that like. Vacation is something that I'm always gonna take, no, whether I'm broke or not, and money's not gonna, kind of stop me from doing that. Like, curious to hear what your thoughts about that because I got some pointers on my end.
Like when I heard that, I was like, make that make sense. How are you going to
Yeah,
afford a luxury, right? Generally speaking, right? A luxury of traveling when you're saying you can't pay your rent on time.
credit card,
It
baby,
is
credit
funny.
card. Chase Freedom,
It's funny.
sponsor us if you
That is
watch.
true.
Yeah.
That is true. That is true. A lot of the economy does run on debt, unfortunately. I was looking into this topic and I noticed like the 2025 Hopper report, it stated that 23% of Americans plan to increase their travel spending despite having higher living costs. And besides debt, right, getting yourself into debt and running a vacation on that, I feel like people are maybe prioritizing their allocation of their funds, right? From, I don't know, maybe things that they would use to purchase, like from a material perspective, to say, you know what, I would buy a bunch more extra clothes or a bunch more video games or whatever your interest might be, right? Instead of spending money there, they might be saving some of that money and allocating to say, I want to go have a vacation or travel somewhere.
Create memories. Yeah.
Maybe that's what's happening, right? I would have to take guesses in this way, but it's funny even amongst our friends. I'll see people going on flights and whatever, right? Even though we know that there's some struggle in terms of salaries didn't go up as much, but everything else is going up from food expense and home expense. But I
Yeah.
think it comes down to budget reallocation. What do you perceive, I guess, as to how people are able to make this happen?
I mean, similar to what you said, right? I think people are really focused on creating memories and experiences, and like they're not budging on that, right? Like, and I know things because of inflation and everything else going on and in the macroeconomic world. I think the dollar value is obviously going down, and because of the fact that it's going down, you also have to figure out like what do you want to prioritize and what you don't want to prioritize. However, I think it also helps with the mental health aspect. I You travel a lot and have traveled in the past. I travel also. I like to travel. And we're going somewhere this summer with our family. And part of the reason is really like to get away, right? To really like do a mental reset. Like I love doing that. I love going on beach vacations. I love going on resort vacations and things like that. Because where we live in the Northeast, we don't have that kind of, we don't have the tropical kind of lifestyle that people in Miami or LA do. And so for me, it's like I need to get like have that go somewhere where I can have that mental reset and I can kind of extract all the crazy things that's happening in my head and also create memories, right, with my family and my kids and all that. But it comes at an expense, right? It's not Nothing is free, and like with inflation, things are rising so much. But to me, I am willing to put up the cost of that for my sanity, right? For me to have that peace of mind for a little bit, for me to have that one weekend or 1 week getaway. I think we have a weekend getaway coming up soon, and so for me, it's like good vibes, creating good memories. And yes, it's gonna come at an expense, but I'm also gonna be mindful of like if I need to prioritize which one it is. Like, do I go buy Pokemon cards or One Piece cards, or do I go on vacation? I'm honestly probably gonna like think about both at this moment of time. But if I have enough of one thing, I'm gonna be like, you know what? Like memories are priceless, right? Like I can maybe I go to a country or a location that I've never been and my family hasn't been, and for me to be able to create those memories, I think there's no price that you can pay, right, for you to have those times. So I think that's why people are doing it, because to create those memories for the mental reset and things like that.
Yeah, some economists are calling it like the lipstick effect. Lipstick
Yeah,
effect. What they're basically saying
lipstick.
is it's consumers still splurge on emotionally satisfying purchases during economic uncertainty. it's sort of a way to feel good, a way to, as you said, mental reset, right? For some, it could be stress relief, right? To say it's been a lot of hustle bustle, a lot of struggling, a lot of whatever it might be. And I just need to get away from, my local environments, right? And just be out there away from everything and come back sort of happier, more
what do you
healthier mentally, and so forth.
Yeah. What do you say to people who have like, there's two sides to it, right? So like one side is there are people out there that want to travel that probably haven't probably been out of the five boroughs, right? Or haven't gone outside of their kind of environment. And there are people who've traveled the world for, and different people, right? Different kind of situations. But what do you say to people who financially are able to travel but don't, and like the ones that are not able to but no, make it happen no matter what, right? Like to create those experiences and memories. Like, what are your thoughts on those two sides of the spectrum?
For the ones that could afford it but don't travel, I think traveling is a must in the world, just so that way we don't live on in our own bubbles and feel that this is the only way society exists, the only way it functions, the only type of sort of mindset that exists, because it could be very homogenized, right? Like you don't get diverse thoughts, diverse opinions, diverse food, right? Diverse experiences. So you might think in your own bubble that this, depending on where you live, if you live in a very developed country and you feel like, yo, this is the most amazing city that ever exists. So you could become very prideful and like, yeah,
Yeah.
we are the best, right? And then you could be in other situations where, unfortunately, you do live in the worst conditions, maybe in a certain area, certain community, and you feel that the whole world is the same way. And no, all you really need to do is go out a bit, right? And see that the world may not be all doom and gloom and everything else based on the area that you're living in, and you don't get exposure there. So I'd say I encourage it so that way you see what the world is out there, and it will give you more of a balanced perspective on, where you might rank in terms of livability and luxury, or even like, you know, uh, from like a very doom and gloom sense, right? Is it the worst? Maybe it could be worse than where you are, right? If you're on that spectrum. So I'd say do it. It's a must. And will broaden your perspective as well as broaden your, I say, knowledge, right? To be able to have conversations with a wide variety of people, and not just to have the ability to talk to a variety of people, but to take their information and make you a better human. I'd say that would be the goal, to become a better human, because now you can all relate, to say we're all the same. We all have our same sort of things that make us happy, things that give us struggle. And then for the individuals that can't afford it, right?
Still figure out a way to
I,
go.
right, I'd say that you can always, I mentioned earlier, reallocate, right? Your budget and see what's up, on how you can sort of minimize spending in certain things, right? Maybe you have a very big taste on expensive sneakers or expensive handbags or whatever it might be, right? Maybe you reduce that and to save some, funds for the travel. And when I was younger, when funds were definitely tighter, right? I would go for road trips, right? My very first thing was, if I never explored out of the boroughs, let me go out of the boroughs. That'll be cheaper, less expensive now. And then maybe if I can't afford a car, I'll go on a long train ride, right? There are train rides that go interstate that allows me to get exposed to a different state. And there are ways and options of transportation that are out there for the budget traveler. There's some buses that like run for like $1 or like some crazy prices, right? And they're not gimmicks, right? I've seen like you could go from here to like Canada for like 30, 40, $50, right? So I say it doesn't need to be expensive, right? It just needs you to have the desire to go out there and make the most of the experiences that you can afford. But definitely a must for anyone and everyone, so that way they appreciate the world a bit more. And it's not consuming it from our typical news outlets or our typical social media experience of like, what we see with people.
So on the flip side of that, right? What I'm also hearing and what I'm also reading is that like tourism backlash is a thing, right? Like people there are, especially when you go to like these not so developed countries or countries that are still like developing, they're not built for massive tourism, and so the locals are really not, most places the locals are welcoming, but at the same time it's also not helping with like many things about like, inflation prices for certain things, overpopulation, right? Because their country's not equipped to have a good amount of people kind of just pop up and show up, right? Like there's countries like Colombia, right? There's a lot of people go there. Countries like Mexico, a lot of people go there. These places obviously they're equipped, but there are other countries out there that are not equipped to have a lot of tourism. So I'm hearing there's a lot of tourism backlash on the flip side, where it's like, yes, traveling is obviously good, but then when you go to a country that's not as developed, or they're not equipped to handle a mass amount of people, I'm hearing that people are having issues with that, especially from the locals. Like, I don't know if you've heard of that or if you've read anything about it, but that's what I'm seeing.
Now, I think tourism has I guess, a couple of different angles. One is if you try to become an expatriate, right, meaning move to that country permanently,
Yeah.
and how an influx of those type of individuals that are moving in can cause prices to go up, right? Especially if it's done in numbers, right? If it's done in a significant amount of number, the locals, right, maybe price for a meal was in their currency $5, right? Now that maybe a lot of wealthy, affluent people are coming in, now it's $10, right? So now the norm for that community is increasing. But those are generally very localized to specific areas where wealthy people might move into. But yeah, there could be that sort of resentment, right? I recall when I traveled to Malaysia or Indonesia, I forget which one of the two countries, but there were certain signs that were out in hotels and even informed like on platforms online that says there is a local cultural dislike for Uber. They didn't like Uber, and their whole understanding with Uber was, well, before prices were determined by the local drivers, and as tourists they may not know exactly what prices like a foreigner would think is the right price to charge. So they would potentially, and nothing was fixed. So sometimes a foreigner could get ripped off, or maybe sometimes it could be dealt with the honest
Yeah.
drivers and get
You
charged
never
a
know.
decent price, right? But and the other part was the fees, right? That Uber charges. So even if the driver typically charged, let's say $10 for a ride, but now they have to, lose some of that $10 to the fees that Uber would bring in. So there was a lot of discouragements to say, do not use Uber. Book, local drivers from our hotel services, right? We can call them up, book it for you in advance. But there wasn't any guarantee that we as the foreigner would be charged a fair price, right? So what ended up happening as foreigners, right? We would look into Uber and see, all right, what's the price, right? And have that as a gauge to say, all right, I don't want to also cause you guys to feel a type of way, right, for using Uber, bringing it to the hotel. And then we would say, all right, this is the rate that we're seeing. Would you be fine with it, right? But we wouldn't bring it up like that. We'd just act like a local and go, yeah, we think this is worth $20. Are you good with the drive? The taxi driver agreed. Great. So there are those sort of backlashes, I would say, right, for services that are brought in or that can happen. But I think, from my experience, generally the developing countries and even like, I don't know if there is like a middle ground where it's already developed, but maybe it's not considered one or whatever. They love tourists, right? Because it gives them the ability to showcase their culture, shares cuisines, right? Get exposed themselves to foreigners where the local community may not ever see a foreigner because they may not be keen on traveling or afford to
Yeah.
be able to travel.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of like great hospitality and great remarks that are made by tourists, and affordability for a foreigner as well to say, I want to go to this country because I can stretch my money even further. It's
Yeah.
generally what I've noticed comes down to when you try to move in and now you're sort of changing the environment.
Yeah, because I'm hearing complaints about, like the world wanted that tourism money, but now they're overwhelmed, right? I mean, like, so not every country, right? There's a lot of countries that embrace, like, they depend on tourism. Their entire economy is dependent on tourism, or large part of their
50% of
economy.
it sometimes.
Right, right. Large part of the economy is dependent on tourism. So I'm not talking about those countries, but I am talking about countries that the Brazils of the world, the Colombias, right? Again, they can probably hold an influx of amount of people coming in on a daily basis. Even those countries are somewhat dependent on the tourism, but also it's the backlash of it, right? It's like the overwhelming side of it that's helping the rising cost of, because the upkeep too, right? It's also like it's not just you're staying at a hotel. When you stay at Airbnbs, there's upkeep costs and things like that that are probably hurting the locals who own some of these places. So I'm seeing both sides of it, and I
To add
understand
to
it.
what you're saying, yeah,
Yeah,
to add to what you're saying, like pollution, waste, right?
yeah,
Sometimes there's a cultural differences where in a lot of the Western countries, people, especially America, people litter, right? And that's heavily disliked in some of the Asian countries or countries throughout the world where they're like, no, littering, you get a fine for that, right? And it's not nice to spit gum or litter. And sometimes even like disrespect, right, to like the way the cultural norms, right? So I know Japan has it's a wonderful place to visit, but they also have some cultural practices where you want to be respectful, right? You also want to give, let's say, the seats to the elderlies or whatnot, right? There is this sort of big respect on how to treat the cultures. So when you bring in people from other cultures where that might be more loosely interpreted or not, something that they follow as much, right? You can get clashes between culture, right? And that causes disturbances between the communities to go like, well, you came to our country, that's fine, we welcome you, but at least,
yeah.
you know,
Respect the culture.
respect the culture to some degree. Because I recall like some social media guy going to Japan and like being very like vulgar verbally, right, and so forth, and he was just saying random stuff to people and sort of almost inciting violence, right, causing them to want to fight, and eventually. He got what was coming from him because some people were like he was posting this on YouTube and just getting
Got
people's
backlash.
reaction. That was his whole thing. He wanted to trigger people. And eventually he got beat down, unfortunately. But that wasn't something that the culture liked. And I don't think anyone here would like either. But we sort of, in New York City, we tolerate it because we know there are crazies out there and we just know to just walk past it because whatever. Everyone has their own way of living and we don't judge and just move on. So there's a more of a tolerant attitude here to just focus on ourselves and ignore the craziness that happens. But that may not be the same thing in another country, right?
But also speaking of like the over tourism kind of concept, there's also, especially the U.S., right? Like we've sanctioned a lot of countries. We've also restricted from going to a lot of countries and letting people in, tourists in from specific countries. I think that is. Do you think that's? I mean, obviously, it's hurting the tourism economy. But overall, do you think like it's hurting or helping some countries, or what are your thoughts on that, right? Like, because the government, I think now more than ever, there's a lot more government restrictions on who can come to America and who can go elsewhere based on your passport color.
Yeah, I'm definitely. I mean, this all comes down to multiple different angles, right? That you could attack this politically and so forth, right? One of the things
Yeah,
that I guess what makes America unique is our multiculturalism, right? We were basically founded by the idea of foreigners traveling into America, right? And making it their own. So it is unique compared to other countries that are just have existed. They were not newly developed or newly, discovered and sort of ran the way that they are because that's their ancient civilization that has transformed over time. So when we have this sort of founding principle and of America and also our constitution that speaks to freedom of religion and everything, right? It has sort of diversity built into the code of life. So when you
it's
go
baked in.
ahead and put in policies that ban, right, countries due to various standards, right? And this is where I try to tread the middle path to say, okay, there is a concern with having illegal immigrants here, right? Well, people come on visit visas, travel visas, whatever, and they don't leave because they want to game the system, whatever. And the backlash to that is policies like this, right? Where like, okay, a lot of people are coming
There's
here
restrictions.
and they're
Yeah,
causing strain on our healthcare system, infrastructure, whatever it might be, right? And that is disliked because the locals, right, citizens will see that as competition for the same amount of resources, right? That's all it comes down to at the end of the day that everyone's chasing. But I also think America is very expansive. It has enough resources, right? It's very rich in order to be able to afford all of this. So we just are bad with the way we spend our money, right? So there's so many angles that can attack this to say, no, we're rich. We should be able to allow people in, but let's all follow rules and laws, right? If you're trying to break rules and laws, let's not do that. But that means we should have better monitoring system to be able to say, okay, this person came into the country on a 3 month visit visa. Why haven't they exited? Why aren't we sending in people, right, to get these people out of the country, right? That could be a more appropriate response to say, I'm going to ban 50 countries. And the problem with those 50 countries is that it seemed like you are targeting certain ethnicities or certain groups of people, certain religions, right? Which is, I guess I heavily dislike. And so I
Tell
guess
us
that's
why,
one
brother.
thing.
Tell us
Yeah.
why.
Huh?
Tell the audience. I mean, we weren't prepped for this, but tell us why. What you dislike about it?
I think
Let's get into
targeting
this
any
quick and
type of
spicy.
people, right? Any type of people or individuals or group of people is messed up to begin with, right? I
Of
don't think
course,
that's
yeah,
right. Again,
yeah,
our
yeah.
core thing is, and I was, our core thing is diversity, right? And I think that's the code of humanity. Forget just the country, right? That's the code of humanity. We are all one and same. So if you're going to go and target, unfortunately, a lot of Muslim countries, a lot of Arab countries, right? A lot of countries that are non-whites, right? There's also a race war going on, unfortunately. And it's very, it's very deceiving to say, oh, I'm going to ban these countries because they're all labeled terrorist, or they're labeled, if we're talking about the South, they're all drug traffickers and criminals, right? When you label an entire group of people under these sort of messed up labeling, that's unfair. That's not incorrect, right? Because we're using, when it comes to, other countries, European countries, or, that are not on the ban list, you could say similar drug activities, crime activities, whatever problems that they might have, right? Internal, terrorist issues where some random white person is shooting up kids in schools and whatever, right? Or bombing something, right? Like I can go on this topic, but you're not calling those
Mm-mm.
countries terrorists, criminals, right? Which you can, if you choose not to. It just opens a field of a lot of hatred, right? And yeah, policy should not be based on those kind of things. It should come down to, yes, if you have limited resourcing and you want to address a illegal problem, fair, right? You have some laws, people are abusing the laws, you want to enforce it, great, do it, no problem, right? If you're going to use sort of income, right? There are certain things where you can say, all right, certain individuals that come, we see that there is a habit of them staying in the country when they're making $10,000 or less, right? Well, apply that throughout the world, right? If you can't fork that up, please don't come, right? We've seen a trend against that, and right now we're in a situation, I guess that's also comes down to, are we in a situation where there's economic prosperity, or there is a lot of sort of concerns in the local population that we're not, the American dream isn't there, we can't afford anything, is everything expensive? So I think it really depends on where the country sees itself and how accepting they could be to share that wealth with other people.
Oh, I agree. I agree with you. I think it makes sense. I don't think. I mean, I think kind of echoing what you said. Yes, there's rules, regulations, and laws in place for certain things, right? But I mean, putting travel restrictions on countries that are not really meant for that, or their entire half of their economy is dependent on on tourism, or you have Americans who want to go visit some of these places to build memories and experiences. I just don't think that's good. I think government shouldn't. Of course, dangerous countries, yes, right. You can put travel bans and restrictions on these things, but if they're not dangerous, you shouldn't do that. And just because on the premise of labeling XYZ country and saying, hey, you can't go there because of they're Muslim. This is a predominantly Muslim country. You can't go there. You can't go there because of other reasons. So I'm with you. I'm with you on that.
And yeah, I
I
feel
think
like
that
they could do enough background checks on people, right? They have enough background check
I mean,
capabilities
I randomly
on
get checked on the airport sometimes.
very
Like
random, right?
you like completely random. Like you check me, you check everybody else too.
Yeah. And I feel like we're in that sort of information war where we know a lot about the people that are trying to come in, right? From their finances through their criminal activities, and a lot of exchange of information between countries to be able to say, do I want this individual to come in, right? So I feel like it can be very, why use this country-based sort of ban and not use an individual ban, right? To say, all right, you've shown activities, right? And I'm a very data person, and a government having a lot of access to data can be a very bad thing in certain situations where they're abusing it, right? But just a simple background check should
Yes.
allow you to be able to understand, all right, should I be allowed to let this person in or not? So yeah,
Great
going back to
topics, man.
traveling though. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, going back to traveling, right? So, do you think, and I always question this, right? I see a lot of travelers these days who travel and they are glued to their camera, they're glued to taking pictures,
Phone.
and they're glued to talking, right? To the video. And when I see this, right, I question. I mean, it's different if you're a blogger, you're trying to make money, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to
Content
question
creator.
that,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? But one of the things that people, besides people going for a vacation for, as we said, mental reset, stress relief, right? Some people even go there just as a reward system. I worked hard so much. This is the way I want to reward
Go see.
myself, right? But then I feel like other people might go there just for social status or clout or like, hey, I've been there, right? And what's your, I guess, view about going on vacations just to post and see how many likes you get or whatever your intent might be?
That's gonna be a long
Do you
one. I'm
think
gonna
that's
try to.
authentic traveling, or do you think that's, like, yeah, or it
Yeah.
may
Yeah.
not even just come down to traveling, it may just come down to the character of that individual.
So I was that's why I said it's gonna be a long one because I can touch from many angles. I will speak to a few. One is it could just be the personality and the characteristic traits of that person, right? Like they I can see it being perceived as from a positive connotation versus a negative one as well. So from a positive standpoint, it could be that they want to create memory, they want to live vicariously in the future, right? Like as they, in the future, and they want to kind of relive those moments in the past, so that's why they capture every single moment they can. But then on the flip side, I also see that you're not truly present, right? You're not really truly enjoying the moment and the experiences, because you're trying to capture it on a digital form. And so I see both sides. But I also see for those specifically who are like, just that's all they do is just for the likes and the clicks and stuff like that. I think that is also them trying to compensate for many different things, which I won't get into. But I mean, it might just be because they're trying to compensate for a lot of things, right? And this is their way of coping, and this is kind of a coping mechanism in a sense. So I would
Right.
say that that's my answer to that. And then, like I said, the positive side could be just they want to capture as many memories as they can. And maybe they're going with their family, their significant other, their partner, and they want to capture every single moment, right? Because that moment may life is short, and that moment may not come back again. So I don't blame people for honestly like doing that because you just never know what their reasoning is. So yeah.
Yeah, sometimes it could just be to have a point, a shared discussion point amongst your group of friends to say,
Yeah,
I,
to
I
show like, hey,
traveled
yeah,
here, it was a cool experience. This is what I got exposed to. So just like people can network about anything, right? Whether it's a basketball game, right? And you just attended it just so you can talk to your friends about whatever, right? The scores or the players. It could be taken from
or
that
the or
angle
the
as
or
well.
the promo card that you get, that's why.
Right, right. You go, like, hey, I went there, did you? You missed out, right? It could also just be to trigger your friends a little bit. And then the negative context or connotation could be, needing validation, right, from people, right? That is another kind of discussion for some people, right? Where it's like, do you do things because you're seeking validation, or do you genuinely, enjoy it?
Anyone that needs validation?
What happened?
Do you know anyone that needs validation from
I
traveling
think
and
I
stuff like
think
that, taking
I,
pictures?
I mean, thankfully, I don't think I see that within our friends group, but I do see that in a lot of my social media feeds. And from that perspective, like, all right, you should, as you mentioned, be present, enjoy, right? You're
Yeah,
spending
yeah.
money to be somewhere out of your regular environment. So you should get exposed to it. As I said, get to know the people and things that you're going to remember, right? And yeah, you could say I'm recording this so I can reflect on it, but if you're not there to witness it and you're still looking through that digital camera, right? That's the same thing you could see in a social media clip. But yeah, I mean, I think all of humanity requires some form of sort of shared recognition, shared sort of
Yeah.
empowerment, right? I think we all
Yep.
like to hear each other just cheerlead for each other, right? Whatever it might be. So when you want to use these sort of words like cheerlead and support, or giving a positive
Champion.
feedback,
Yeah.
positive remark, you can sort of generalize it to say, you know what, these are validating or recognizing words that, people encourage each other to have them enjoy life better or be happier, whatever, term you want to put into it. Uh, Going back to the traveling side that you were talking about, right? One of the things I noticed with the negative some negative outcomes of traveling is you'll see that hotel prices start getting jacked up, Airbnb rentals start sort of getting implemented on it, right, into certain
Yeah.
areas. You can see sort of hotel chains coming in, big brands coming in and taking over a
Yeah.
lot of,
A lot
let's
of
say,
them are.
affordable plots of lands, a lot of affordable, like maybe you could actually enjoy a more affordable beachside resort view, but now because big chains are coming in and taking those over, you're
Yeah.
not able to anymore. So as a local, you might be like, wow, I used to be able to go to that beach, enjoy it, right? And I spent cheap money, right? Or affordable money to be able to enjoy that experience. But now I can't because companies have taken over, right? Or apartments were more affordable right now, right? But now that Airbnb is being used as a tenant, I'm getting priced out of places that I can't afford anymore. So there are all these things that I feel governments need to keep an eye on, need to sort of maintain rules and regulations so that way the citizens who should be benefiting from, interest in tourism, that they're not priced out, that there are effective, whatever might be infrastructures that are available to them, or regulations that are implemented, as well as to focus on, like, to not get that your cultures, because sometimes what's that term that they use when certain type of race or individuals come in, and it's gentrifying,
Yeah.
right?
Gentrification. Yeah.
So that has been something where you end up losing the culture and the people because of all of this. So I think it's a big responsibility on the government to monitor those and implement things where there's a right balance, where you don't want to become sort of uninviting to foreigners that do help boost your economy, right? But you also don't lose the cultural presence there. I think Japan was recently. I talk about a lot of Japan because it pops up in my feed. Like they're trying to implement like a fee for coming into the country, right? And I don't think that's a bad thing because there are a lot of other countries that implement a visa fee and stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
There are certain countries that only give you a 90-day visa or a 30-day visa or whatever, so that way they limit how long you stay there, right? So there are ways that you can influence tourism and make sure that there's a happy medium. So, do you think traveling should remain even if you're broke?
Yeah, yeah. Because I think I always say this, right? Exposure dictates experience. Because to me, it's like the more exposure you get, the better your experiences are gonna be. Especially when you're traveling. Echoing what you were saying here in the past. I mean, in before earlier, like in the conversation, that if you're not traveling whatever to whatever capacity you can within the means that you're able to, you're not really truly going to experience what the world is out there like, right? You're not going to have diversity of thought. You're not going to have diversity of, kind of conversations, the diversity of knowledge, the things that you learn when you go to different countries and different states and meet with different kinds of people. Those experiences really will shape you and dictate honestly and truly like the trajectory of your future, because you may meet someone that you didn't think you would normally would meet. You may learn something that you can apply that knowledge somewhere down the line in the future. But if you never made that move, or if you never like went to go visit, your life would be very different, right? And I think, like I said, like exposure truly dictates your experience, and the more you're exposed to, the experiences are going to get much and much better. And whether it's good or bad experience, the fact that you're having an experience is, it could either be one or two things. It could be a memory, or it could be a great story, right? That you tell to people and things like that. But I think that nothing bad comes out of it. Obviously, you have to be cautious of where you're going, and be mindful and careful of cultures and respect everyone and everything. But apart from that, if you're doing the norm and you're okay and you're just traveling, or if you're able to travel, absolutely, definitely travel. Obviously, if you're like dead broke, right, you have to figure out your priorities and things like that. But if you are able to be a little bit flexible, I would definitely prioritize traveling. Those are my like kind of like final words on that.
As you mentioned that, I recall an interesting experience with like safety and whatnot. And this is dating me like 15 years ago, right? A couple of my friends and I, we ended up, it was my first international trip, right, out of the country. The three of us were doing backpacking through Europe. And,
Nice.
there was always this sense of growing up in the Bronx or whatever, you feel like, oh, it's not as safe and whatever, or you might think that the police aren't there, right? There are a lot of people that think that the police doesn't have their back, they're not doing their job, and there are many people that do. So we have, a varied opinion on police and the justice system and judicial system in terms of putting criminals or bad people into court and so forth. But not getting too political on any of those. When I went to, and again, this is not calling out this country as a bad thing. Maybe I'm sure things have improved, but we went to London, right? And it's, as a New Yorker, we are used to hanging out quite late, right? 11, 12, 11 p.m., 12 a.m., 1 a.m., whatever it might be. It's quite safe, especially if you're around the main city areas and things like that. Whether you're dining out, whether you're going to a concert, whatever it might be, whether you're watching movies or even just playing bowling or sports. It's all good and fun, safe, etc. When I went to London, one of the things we noticed was, I think it was like just past 10 or 11, I forget when,
Everything
in the
shuts
late
down.
evening. And one of the things we noticed was, we didn't factor this in, but their trains, their underground, right, their tube, does not function after a certain time. They close it off, and there are still like buses and stuff to go to, but we're going at the end of the night and realize, you know, their train station doesn't run 24/7. So that very point made me sort of appreciate the 24/7 that we have in New York City, right? And how it can impact small things like this that you don't normally think about, that you're not exposed to, right? I always was used to trains running all the time, right? Maybe a little less infrequent during the nighttime, but not like a complete stop. But in London, it was a complete stop. So that was one experience, right? I was like, oh, okay. I appreciate no matter, we can still complain about cleanliness of our train stations versus London's, which was much cleaner and nicer. So there are goods and bads from everything that you can sort of compare and contrast. The other thing I noticed was we went around a block that we thought was safe and whatnot, but we noticed this, like, this bad person, you might want to call them, like probably in their early and mid 20s. They had a water gun and they were spraying. It seemed like couples, guy and girl going to a gathering, club or gathering, whatever it might be. And they were water spraying the guy and the girl, and they were not doing anything, right? They just continued walking at a more faster pace just to get away from the situation. And that also happened to another guy that was passing by. And again, they weren't doing anything. And then it came to us three guys, my friends and I, happened to also be passing that same area, witnessing all that. And one of my friend remarks, don't try to shoot that water gun at me, right? And that turned into almost a big confrontation, right, amongst him. And he ended up calling a couple of his own friends or whatever, right? Thankfully, nothing bad happened. But before actually even our interaction, the same individual was also shooting their water gun to a fire truck that was passing by, at the firefighters, and they paid no attention, right, to them as well. And the sirens weren't on or anything. I think they're just passing by. So the fact that multiple people were going by this block, nothing was happening. Firefighters didn't say anything, right? I think our New York City firefighters might have hosed the guy down just for the sake of it, right? And that also told me like things might be a bit lax or unsafe. Whereas in New York City, we wouldn't like take well to that sort of experience, right? There's a difference between getting mugged, but in a random alley in any parts of the world versus like tolerating this kind of stuff. So you get exposed to, as you said, negative experiences, right? And both positive experiences to say, oh, hopefully, we're improving everything, right? We
Yeah,
take
yeah, yeah.
what we're seeing in other countries that are working, implement it to our side, and whatever is, whatever it that's working for us, they implement, and whatever is not working for us, but they did a better job. So I feel like there can be all these shared experiences and shared growth by your exposure to these kind of things, right?
Yeah, yeah. And great
A long
conversation,
straight,
man.
but
Great.
just wanted to share that experience with you, everyone.
Yeah, I think it's important to travel. Those would be my final words. Definitely travel, whether it's locally, domestically, internationally. Definitely travel as much as you can because it's important. We live a short life. We don't know how many summers we have left, and we don't know how many winters we have left out, and we don't know how many fall, seasons we have left. So it's important to travel as much as you can. Make some great experiences if within the means, within your means, living within your means, and create those memories, right? Because those are the ones that you're going to be able to take with you.
Yeah, like if I'm to close, I would say life could get very repetitive, boring, mundane, right? So travel, add some color to it, right? Add some color to your life canvas.